A boy named Ray lived in a poor neighborhood in the city. He was an unemotional person who once gained the ability to see colors inaccessible to other eyes. Like most children from the neighborhood, the young man spent most of his day on the street, socializing with other teenagers. One day, two friends were sitting among a pile of scrap metal when strange sounds caught their attention. The guys told each other that it was a golem, and it was already here. One of the young men offered the creature a flashlight in exchange for food. A golem appeared in Sector 50 of the poor neighborhoods quite recently, and none of the residents knew where it came from or who its owner was. For the poor, it was important that in exchange for scrap metal, he gave them food. The giant carefully evaluated what the teenagers offered him. It seems that today the golem was not interested in the children's offer. It turned around and walked away. The guy who offered the flashlight shouted, wanting to know where the giant had gone, which probably doesn't always work. One of the young men was sitting a little further away on a pile of scrap metal, watching the other two. The one who offered the flashlight looked furious. He wanted the golem to return, and his friend tried to calm him down so as not to cause trouble. The young man heard tiles, as if some monsters similar to this giant were killing people right on the street. The next moment, the mysterious hooded man jumped out of his hiding place. He landed on the ground a few steps away from the danger. The stranger took hold of the strap of the bag hanging on his shoulder. It turned out that inside was a pile of scrap metal, a broken flashlight, screws, and an old radio. The golem's eyes glowed with red fire, as if it were scanning the contents of the young man's bag. A little later, the creature stretched out its giant hand to the boy and took the offered metal with 2 fingers. The golem raised his hand and poured the entire contents of the bag into his mouth. The guys, whose attempt to exchange scrap for food had failed, looked stunned. They had already seen a young man who, not for the first time, had managed to earn a lot of food from such an exchange. The hungry children thought it didn't make sense, how he managed to get so much food every time. What the boy received might be enough for 3 days, but a more determined young man told his friend that he had an idea. He called the stranger the Ghost of 17th Street. Meanwhile, the guy with the groceries had reached 17th Street, Sector 50th. His steps were confident. He was returning home ignoring everything around him. Although the hungry teenagers were afraid of the lucky stranger, they decided to try to implement their own plan. The Ghost of 17th Street continued on his way. Only at first glance it seemed that he did not notice anything. The young man managed to count his pursuers, 7 guys. The next moment he stopped and advised them not to hide anymore, asking how long they were going to follow him. One of the teenagers, apparently the leader of the pack, said that Ray had excellent perception because they were trying to be careful when chasing him. The sleek young man had an interesting appearance. His nose was covered with a band-aid, and his smile had lost 1 tooth in a street fight, and his right hand was shining with brass knuckles. Ray called the leader Ron and reminded him that he had warned him last time. His eyes shone like blue stars in the darkness, and the young man remembered how he had promised the fat bandit that if he showed up again, he would make sure he couldn't walk anymore. Ron shouted back, did he really think he could get away with it like last time? Let him just put his bag on the ground. If Ray complies with the request, he will be able to go home unharmed. The leader smiled, hoping for the enemy's good sense. But the young man said that Ron was lying. They would not let him go. Local kids have a saying that a ghost lives on 17th Street. The white ghost walks with an inaudible gait. It does not feel any emotions. It is better not to look a ghost in the eye, otherwise all the lies will come out. This legend did not amuse the leader Ron at all. He only clenched his fists tighter. He could no longer contain his own rage, and calling Ray a selfish bastard, he attacked. The leader promised to make sure that the young man would never say anything like this saying again. Throwing the bag to the ground, the hero managed to dodge the blow of an angry Ron. The bandit was not expecting anything like this, so he lost his balance and flew forward. Ray did not let the bastard fall to the ground. He grabbed him by the collar of the light. He swung out and hit Ron in the chest, a turn of events the street gang leader could not have imagined. He did not restrain his emotions and screamed loudly in pain. The 6 subordinates of the leader shouted his name, but did not dare to intervene in the fight. They saw Ron fall to the ground with his heavy carcass. The other gang members were furious, ready to attack Ray at any moment. One of the guys ordered the rest of the group to attack the young man. He wanted to destroy him. Without further ado, the angry bandits ran forward, waving their sticks. The first of the attackers jumped up high and attacked Ray with a shout of death. But the hero easily avoided the blow, and the next moment he attacked the enemy himself, elbowing him in the face. The next moment he fell to the ground, spitting up red liquid, a scene that amazed his gangmates. Ray decided not to wait for the next attack and attacked the other pursuers himself. Everything around him turned red, but this did not affect the hero's condition. Not a single emotion appeared on his face. When all the bandits were lying motionless on the ground, the young man turned to the leader and said that no matter how many people he took, nothing would change. Ron roared fiercely, calling the Shire a fucking monster. He did not expect that one person could overcome 7. Only now did he realize that he was left face to face with an incredibly strong opponent. And at that moment, the street gang leader was really scared. As the hero slowly approached the frightened enemy, he reminded Ron that he had already warned him. Before the attack, the leader heard Ray promise that if he didn't keep up, he would never be able to walk again. He hid the knife behind his back, watching in horror as the ghost of 17th Street approached him. The next moment, overcoming his fear, he jumped to his feet and held his weapon out in front of him, warning Ray to stay away. The young man calmly looked at the knife. He realized that the gang leader posed no threat to him because the forces were too unequal. The hero saw his own reflection on the dagger's blade and thought that Ron was right to call it a monster. At an inopportune moment, Ray plunged into his own memories, wondering if this had really happened to him when he was 10 years old. It was at that time that he realized that he was different from other people. When he, then a little boy, injured his knee, he did not cry at all. And this surprised his friends, who asked him if he was not in pain at all. The other children wanted to see his emotions so they could communicate, but little Ray did not understand how to demonstrate them. He did not cry in pain and did not get angry when his friend was attacked by other children. Even when one of his friends named Bello died, the hero did not shed a single tear while the other boys mourned the death of their friend. The children were surprised by the lack of emotion in the 10-year-old boy, and they decided that something was wrong with him. He scared them. It was at that moment that he was left all alone, the lonely ghost of 17th Street. Ray realized that he would never be able to feel what people call emotions. The lonely child had a lot of thoughts on this topic in his head, and he thought he was wrong. He thought he wanted to be like everyone else and have friends. The hero did not know if he would ever be able to feel what other people call emotions. 6 years have passed and he still feels nothing, although he has learned to read the emotions of others. Ray told Ron that knives are not allowed in fights here. The boy asked the bandit if he had brought the dagger with him on purpose for use, but the man replied that he had picked up the weapon recently in a dumpster. The hero immediately realized that the fat leader was lying. He saw a black spot blurring on the attacker's chest. Ray could see a world that is inaccessible to ordinary people. Everyone has a small cup inside them, and when someone feels a certain emotion, it is filled with a certain color of mana. The traces of anger, of hate, and love have red energy. Mockery and despair fill the cup with blue mana. Joy, happiness, and elation are yellow. There are many other colors that fill the world around us. Ron, with black mana in his heart, warned that if the flight made even a single step, he would stab it with his dagger. The deep black energy on the guy's chest attracted the hero's attention. It was a strong horror. And the closer Ray got to Ron, the scarier he became. He backed up until his back hit the wall and there was nowhere to run. Drops of sweat appeared on the gang leader's face, and he seemed to become smaller. But the hero knew no pity. He wanted to teach this bandit a lesson. Ray said that such a liar deserves to be punished. Having finished with his attackers, the hero continued his journey home. The gloomy urban landscape around him was painfully familiar. A little while later, Ray finally reached his destination and pulled back the curtain and entered the room. In the room, a gang of hungry children was waiting for him. One of them was named Pale. He was the leader of the dungeon children. The hero was like an older brother to them, and the kids were laughing and hugging their favorite Ray. When the children calmed down, everyone sat down on the floor, and it was time to see what they had managed to do today. The dim light of the lamp made it possible to see small coins, chewing gum, a piece of bread, and a few sweets that had migrated from the children's pockets to the floor, their loot for the day. Despite this trifle, Pale tried to figure out how to divide it into 7 equal parts. Ray silently removed the strap of the bag from his shoulder. He hadn't yet had time to get his own loot. The next moment, the kids saw a pile of food and they shouted, calling the hero cool. They immediately realized that the young man had gotten the food from the golem, and the boys also tried to do the same, but they failed. Ray was the only one who could do it because a golem only takes magical items that have mana left over, and if a person doesn't see this energy, they won't find the right garbage. Pale drew the attention of the others by saying that it was time to share the food, and thanks to their older friend, they would not have to go hungry today. They started with a younger one named Josephine, a boy who was very happy to receive food. He was quite hungry. Ray did not participate in the distribution. He silently left the room. The young man, mature beyond his years, thought that they always did not have enough for everyone. The hero was looking at the raging stream of dark water and deciding whether to go to the warehouse. When he saw his own face in the water, he remembered that he owed these children his own life, and now it was his duty to help them in everything. A year ago, the children of the dungeon found him almost unconscious. Ray lay on the ground covered in snow. 6 friends gathered around the stranger. Together, they pulled the barely alive hero out of the snowdrift, who did not mind dying. The rescuers realized that the young man had regained consciousness, and when he opened his eyes, he saw frightened children in front of him. They were happy that the guy was feeling better, which means he will recover. When Ray returned from his memories, he thought that he had to repay all his debts, even if it was a simple favor or revenge. Suddenly, the hero heard someone calling his name. It was Pale, the leader of the dungeon children, who believed that Ray should definitely get his share. The hero refused, saying that he was fine and not hungry. Suddenly, the young man's stomach rumbled treacherously, and his friend said with a smile that Ray's stomach disagreed with him. Pale offered to divide the piece of bread equally. The guy was determined and wasn't going to take no for an answer. The friends ate and watched a strange natural phenomenon, a black rainstorm. Rumor has it that rain turns black when wizards have used too much magic. Almost all of them live in sectors with smaller numbers. Pale believed that the golem was sent by wizards, while Ray disagreed, saying that it could be an ordinary robot. But my friend strongly objected. He spoke very confidently. The leader of the dungeon children said a little dreamily, this golem was definitely moving with magic. The young man looked up at the sky, his large eyes glowing with golden fire. In fact, Ray agreed with Pale. As the golem moves, it attracts mana from the environment to its core. The different energies passing into the golem are mixed and released as black gas. Ray couldn't shake the thought that the black drain and the black gas were connected by something. But now the hero had important things to do. He got to his feet and told Pale that he would be out for a while. His friend looked worried about why he would go somewhere in such a heavy black rain. The young man did not answer, only advised to watch the level of the river. It would be dangerous if it overflowed its banks. And the next moment he rushed away, and Pale could not stop him. When the leader of the dungeon children was left alone, he grabbed his head. He was not overcome by the feeling of danger that threatens Ray. He always does what he thinks is right. Meanwhile, the hero quickly reached the corner of 2 blocks, now standing at the intersection of 17th and 18th Streets. In the young man's head, he heard that in the black rain everyone hides for fear of getting into trouble. People believe that one drop of such rain can make them sick. Ray was not one of those who believed in all kinds of superstitions. In addition, it is able to protect itself from rain, so it becomes easier to work. A little later, the hero reached his destination, a grocery store for the lame Hector on 18th Street. There, behind the fence, during a black rainstorm, 3 local workers were playing cards. Ray calculated everything correctly. The guards always gamble on rainy days. He found a hole in the fence and easily entered the warehouse. Without any obstacles, the hero reached the building and began to dismantle the brick wall. Ray could not see everything around him. It was too dark. The young man saw many different types of mana in the air, and he attracted only certain types and then mixed them using the right formula. This art requires certain efforts. It exhausts the hero. Ray held out his open palm, on which mana began to dance, forming a ball. After mixing the energy, fire appeared on the young man's hand. Although he doesn't know such methods, practicing over and over again, Ray was able to learn how to use them, and he managed to notice that red mana is harder to control than other colors. The hero thought it might be related to his sense of emotion, but he didn't know if he could create a fire that was bigger. The young man was so absorbed in his own thoughts that he did not feel the danger, and at that very moment a dagger flew at him. By some miracle, the blade of the weapon did not cause Ray any significant damage, only slightly scratched the edge of his ear. The knife stuck into the wall behind the guy, and his presence in the warehouse was exposed. The hero heard the guards shouting, saying that the rat had finally shown up. It was faster than they thought. And Ray had a thought that someone had been hiding in this warehouse before him. The guards continued to search for the person who was illegally staying at the facility. They were wearing special glasses to see well in the dark. The guy realized that 3 people were trying to hunt him down, and they knew exactly where he was hiding. He could not have imagined that the security guards at this warehouse could have such equipment as night vision goggles. All 3 prepared to throw their knives at their prey again. The next moment, 3 sharp blades flew toward the dark figure hiding behind the boxes. Ray's eyes opened wide, and he looked directly at the weapon that was rapidly approaching him. The hero quickly realized what to do and ran out of his hiding place. Moving along a zigzag trajectory, he deflected each of the flying daggers. One of the guards screamed in fright. It seems he was already familiar with Ray's capabilities. His partner shouted that he needed to aim better, but the man realized that it was useless. Something was wrong with this guy. The security guard did not have time to defend himself and received a heavy blow to the neck. The man fell on the boxes of food and lost consciousness. The other 2 could not understand how the guy could see them in complete darkness. Ray's usually blue eyes turned bright yellow at that moment. The guards' chests were glowing with orange mana, which meant rage and surprise at the same time. One of the men swung his kinjal again, hoping to hit the villain. The guard's rage did not allow him to think clearly. Ray skillfully used his talent, and in his short life he managed to gain enough experience in using his gift. By observing the flow of mana from the heart and through the arteries of the body, the hero was able to predict the next move of his opponent. He pushed off the ground and found himself in the air and kicked the guard. The blow was so strong that the man lost his balance and began to fall on his back. The last guard of the three, who was still unharmed, thought it was simply impossible. He was so confused that he didn't have time to react and saw Ray in front of him at the last moment before the impact. Due to the young man's incredible speed, the attack was so strong that the man bent in half and fell to the ground, flying through the air. These three adults, despite their equipment, had no chance against a talented teenager with a special gift. Just when Ray thought the fight was over, another guard appeared in the room. He exclaimed that he had come to check what was going on because he heard a noise. The hero knew this man. He was a singer in Hector's band named Gampri. This man with a scar on his face immediately realized who had neutralized the three brothers. It turns out that he has already had to deal with Ray and the consequences of his actions. Humphrey's eyes burned with red, fierce fire. He called the boy a little rat. The hero thought that this guard was really as scary as they said. The young man decided not to tempt fate today and to get out of Hector's warehouse as soon as possible. As Gumption was blocking the exit, Ray accelerated and punched him in the stomach. But the boy's strength was obviously not enough against the burly man. The guard shouted, letting the nasty rat avoid his attack. Humphrey took a step forward, trying to grab Ray. This giant was too fast and agile for its size. This time, the hero also managed to avoid being hit and bounced back. Gumption appreciated the guy's speed and realized that he was not an ordinary opponent. Ray thought that they were at completely different levels of ownership of their own bodies. Gumpri made another attempt to attack the boy. He quickly rushed forward and brought his right hand to strike. The hero also managed to assess the enemy's capabilities. He assumed that it would be difficult to overcome this thug alone. Although perhaps the guard's rage will play into Ray's hands, the young man realized that he needed to quickly come up with a fight strategy. The hero decided to aim at the enemy's open pain points. Ray immediately decided to take action and punched Humphrey in the stomach. Before the blow, the young man managed to concentrate fire mana in his hand. That's why his attack was unusual. He didn't just hit his opponent with his fist, but gave him an energy punch. The man immediately grabbed his chest with his hand, and it seemed to him that a fire was burning inside. Ray took advantage of this moment to escape, at which point other guards arrived, and the chief among them ordered his subordinates to search the area and find the offender. At that moment, the hero was hiding away from the buildings, and the thought flashed through his mind that he would be found. Suddenly, he saw something behind him that caught his attention. He threw a stone towards the entrance, and the guards heard the sound and ran there. At that moment, we had to sign up, otherwise we might not have a chance to get out. Ray understood this well and was not going to waste a single minute. The hero ran away. He thought that he had searched the warehouse of Hector's famous group and put himself in terrible danger. If they find him, they will definitely kill him, but he is not afraid of death. The only thing that scares Ray is that the children of the dungeon won't last long without him. Even without feeling emotions, the hero managed to get very attached to these kids and felt responsible for them. He has to save his own life because if he is killed, he will not repay the debt. Suddenly, the young man heard one of the guards shouting behind him. His location had been revealed. Ray looked around, trying to quickly assess the situation. Why the hell he was so unlucky today? The hero ran away. He could hear the stomping feet of his pursuers behind him. Turning a corner, the young man saw that there was a wall ahead of him, and he was driven into a dead end. The guards could hardly catch their breath. The guy was very fast, and finally their efforts were crowned with success. One of the men shouted, demanding that the young man come over and return the stolen goods before a dagger hole formed in his stomach. The hero looked around cautiously, but he did not see Humphrey among his pursuers. This was the only good news in recent times, because he can definitely beat these two. The young man's fist glowed with red mana, and the guards were already running straight for him. Ray managed to dodge the dagger and intercepted the man's hand. The first enemy was quickly finished with the knife, which fell from his hand to the ground. The chi concentrated in the hero's hand multiplied his strength. The second guard could not understand how an ordinary teenager could be so strong. At this point, Ray pointed his second hand with yellow mana directly at the enemy's face. An ordinary person could not withstand such an attack. The man instantly lost consciousness and fell to the ground, smoke rising from his face. As soon as the hero had finished with these two, he heard the voices of the other guards, and he thought that there was no end in sight, and he couldn't use magic consistently. But this place still deserved attention, and the young man felt some kind of attraction to this warehouse. He hid in a garbage can, and just then the guards ran past. In his hiding place, Ray realized that the footsteps of his pursuers were fading away. The young man breathed a sigh of relief, but he was not found. He decided to stay among the garbage until morning, because if he was chased to the bridge, the children would be in danger. The hero closed his eyes and was already falling asleep, wondering when the rain would end. The next morning could not please with good weather. Everything was gloomy and gray. The hero opened his eyes and immediately saw a strip of morning sky and realized that he had fallen asleep. Ray jumped out of his hiding place, thinking the danger was over. It was at that moment that he heard a man's voice saying that he had found the fugitive. The young man did not expect this turn of events, but he bravely faced the danger. Right in front of him was a man, one of the guards, who was hiding a knife behind his back. He smiled and said how good it was that he had decided to come back. Ray realized by the color of the mana in the stranger's chest that he was incredibly angry, and the hero himself had not yet fully recovered from the night's adventures. The man smiled when he saw the knife in the boy's hand. He said that it would be a fight between real men, and that they would not have to hold back. With his hand raised to strike, the guard attacked Ray in a jump, but thanks to the teenager's agility, he managed to avoid being wounded. This infuriated the guard, and he began to swing the knife even more actively. For a moment, the hero lost his balance, and it could have cost him his life. The bastard was already sure of his victory. Ray almost fell and dropped the knife, and now he had nothing to defend himself with. The guard's knife came close to the hero's eye. But he didn't hurt the boy, although there were splashes of blood on Ray's face. It was the red liquid of the enemy, whom he did not destroy. The hero managed to survive, which means the day started well. A man with a gun in his hand saved the boys' lives. It seems that they knew each other, because the rescuer told the young man that it was dangerous and called his name. Putting away his weapon, the guy put a cigarette in his mouth and took a lighter from his pocket. He asked Ray with a smile what he had been up to this morning, and it was the boss of 17th Street, Niels. He told the hero that it was very dangerous. Instead of answering, Ray asked if someone had called Niels, because usually at this time he was still asleep. The boss of 17th Street replied that he had heard that Hector's guys were looking for someone. Suddenly, the man saw the boy trying to hide the cans, and Niels asked if this was what he had stolen from Hector. He thought the hero was crazy. How could he put himself in danger for scrap metal? Ray thought that people like the 17th Street boss were difficult to deal with. They are quite rare. Their emotions are so slow that the cup is never completely filled. Niels said that doing so could get you killed. Some people shouldn't be touched. And Ray stubbornly replied that if he didn't do it, they would starve to death. The boss replied that it didn't matter. He had now repaid the debt for his previous rescue, and the hero replied that he had only pulled the man out of the river because he had confused him with a bag of supplies. Niels was not upset by this word at all because thanks to Ray, he is still alive. The hero replied to the owner of 17th Street that he had already paid for that incident before. A year ago, a young man accidentally pulled Niels out of the waters of the Black River. He was a member of Sector 46 who was betrayed. It is unlikely that he lied when he told us about it. It was this man who gave Ray fist-fighting lessons as a repayment for his rescue, which were very useful for the teenager. Now the hero decided to ask Niels about what was bothering him. Ray was interested in joining an organization. The hero wanted to join the one headed by the boss of 17th Street. He believed that only then would the children of the dungeon be safe. Judging by Niels's reaction, he was not expecting such a conversation at all. The man seemed confused. He turned around and walked away. Turning the corner of the building, he smoked again, trying to collect his thoughts. Niels's next question stunned Ray. As it turns out, he knew that the young man could use magic. The boy's reaction confirmed his thoughts, so he was right and not crazy. The man had seen this boy make a fire without matches or a lighter. Ray asked the 17th Street boss to tell him everything he knew about magic. Niels replied that he had little information, only a few things he had asked the sorcerer from his previous organization about. Air mana is used for magic. Very few people can recognize and control this energy. Ray asked if the magician had said anything about colors. Niels replied that he hadn't heard anything about colors. The man said that mana was impossible to see, and the hero was stunned, because he was the one who was walking in that case. Ray seriously asked if that was really all. Maybe the boss had forgotten something. The man made a sharp blow. It seems he did not intend to hit the boy, only to scare him. But the teenager did not look scared. The young man wanted to know what answer Niels would give to his question. The 17th Street boss refused Ray's request to join the organization. The man decided to explain that all the sectors are located on the banks of the Elton River, and if you move upstream, you can reach other sectors. Niels believed that Ray could leave the poor neighborhoods and find a better life for himself, and it would be a big mistake to let a child with such abilities die here. The man asked if the boy had ever thought of leaving Sector 50, and he was ready to help him find a car. But the young man replied that he was taking care of the children of the dungeon, so he could not leave this place. The boss smiled and asked me not to worry about it, because he was going to set up a kind of shelter. It seems that Niels is serious about looking after the little vagrants. Ray was looking at the man's chest. The colors of his mana were neutral. It was hard to tell if he was telling the truth, but he was probably not lying. The young man decided to warn his boss, having visited Hector's warehouse, and found that he was preparing for war. He saw trucks full of weapons arrive there. Niels replied that he had his finger on the pulse, so he knew about it. The use of firearms in any conflict means a direct declaration of war. Ray said that if Niels loses this war, people in the stores will suffer. He thought that the amounts to defend his organization were more significant. The boss replied that it seems so only because there are many people worse than him. Stop treating him like an old man, he's not even married. And Ray replied seriously that he was indeed old. These words of the boys angered Niels, and he tried to hit the boy again, but he managed to jump away. At that moment, a car pulled up next to them, and the driver told his boss that they had to go. As they were getting into the car, the man warned Ray that it would soon be a real battlefield, so if possible, they should find another shelter. Then, without warning the teenager, Niels threw something at him, and the boy managed to catch it. Opening his palm, he saw a glass ampoule with a green cross. The man smiled and advised the boy to treat his injured ear. The next moment, the car drove away, leaving Ray alone with his thoughts. The hero was frozen in place, with no plan in his head for what to do next. The young man decided to go to his native 17th Street, near the central square. There he saw one of his cavemen sitting next to an elderly beggar. The boy was very happy to see Ray alive and well, because last night he did not return home. They were worried. The boy asked his friend why he looked so shabby. Tears came to the boy's eyes, and he wondered if Ray had been fighting with someone, and the hero hurried to reassure the child, saying that everything was fine. He had just fallen. Josephine wiped away his tears. He was really worried about his hero. He saw the boy's incredible colors of mana. Only he can feel so many emotions at the same time. Ray gave the kid some canned food and told him to go to their tent and tell Pale that he would be there soon. The boy did not argue and immediately ran home. When they were alone, Ray asked old Viola if she had told Josephine anything. The woman replied that she was telling the child about the rainbow. The young man asked not to tell the children about it, because if the blind storyteller continued to tell them about different fantasies, the children would not get used to street life. Viola asked who would continue to carry the fantasies if not the children. Ray looked at the old woman. His eyes changed color. He tried to guess her emotions. He did not see purple mana in anyone but Viola. The hero warned the blind storyteller that a war might soon break out here and that she should change the street. The woman thought Ray was very kind. She heard him leave. The next morning, Ray was knocking on the door of a local establishment, fulfilling a delivery order. The man who opened the door was very surprised to see the guy. He said that Ron had warned him. Now he would be delivering. The hero thought that the bandit would not be here anytime soon. Both his legs were broken. The hero asked the shop owner if he was going to evacuate because there would be no customers when the war started, and the man replied that he had nowhere to go. He also hoped that the war might not happen, and Ray asked what he meant. The man pointed to the closed door and explained that Hector and Niels were talking there, and if the two agreed, there would be no war. The next moment, the door opened abruptly, and the store owner was eagerly awaiting the outcome of the negotiations. The first to leave the room were 18th Street boss Hector and two of his henchmen. The man carefully examined the store's premises, and he had a large scar on his face. Ray wore a hood over his blonde hair to avoid attracting attention, but Hector noticed him anyway and asked why the child was working in a place where all the adults had run away. He came over and smugly put his hand on the hero's shoulder, wishing him to try hard, because that's the only way to survive in this world. Hector threw a few silver coins into Ray's palm and advised him to treat himself to something. The hero didn't say a word, because he realized that the forces were unequal now, and that Gumption might recognize him. As he was leaving the room, the man with the scythe looked at the hooded child. The band-aid on the hero's ear did not escape his gaze. Humphrey looked around sharply, keeping his eyes on Ray. The guy adjusted his hood. He guessed the man recognized him. Hector's henchman looked at the hooded teenager closely, but still said nothing. As he was getting into the car, the boss asked Humphrey what he was doing, and the man replied that he was leaving. The shopkeeper breathed a sigh of relief when Hector's car drove away. The hero realized that Humphrey remembered the wound on his ear, but why he left and said nothing. The store owner called Niels. He wanted to know the results of these negotiations as soon as possible. He and Ray went into the office where the 17th Street boss was sitting. Niels, with a cigarette in his mouth, sadly replied that the negotiations had failed. Unfortunately, he could not do anything. The war was going on. The shop owner was stunned by the news, and he was hoping that the war would be avoided. Niels replied that he could not accept such stupid conditions, such as a takeover of their organization. It was really the worst thing that could happen. The owner said that it was not his fault. It seems that he will not be able to open his store for a long time, and the boss advised Ray not to leave his hideout anytime soon. A little later, the hero left the store, and on the way home, he thought that if the war broke out, he would lose the opportunity to walk around the city. His next thought was that before the war started, we should find as much food as possible. When the hero reached the street corner, a black car blocked his way. The glass on the driver's door slowly lowered as Gumption sat at the wheel. Ray couldn't see it yet, but he thought that he hadn't seen a car like that before in the 50th sector. It looked suspicious. The young man decided that he needed to look into it. At the same time, he went to 18th Street, to the entrance to the base of Hector's group. The head of the group himself came to meet the person sitting in the back seat of the black car. A luxuriously dressed young man with a pince-nez came out, holding a stick, and Hector called him a magician and very politely invited him inside. Ray was very interested in the stranger, and now he wanted to know who he was. From this man came dark blue, almost black mana, a lot of it. This flower on his chest resembled the one on the golems. The hero wanted to know what those rings were around the man's cup. There is also a lot of mana around these rings, as if the magician is using them to limit his energy. Ray concluded that this man was incredibly dangerous, and the young man decided that he had to tell Niels about it immediately. He immediately headed back to 17th Street to the entrance of their boss's base. When the hero arrived, he saw the commotion and wondered what had happened to their supplies. The young man approached one of the men and asked where to find Niels. He recognized the guy and asked him how he got to their protected facility. Ray replied that it was easy because the gate was open, and he wanted to find out where to find Niels as soon as possible. The man said that the boss had gone outside to prepare for war. He added that it was dangerous here, so let the guy get out. The hero asked me to tell Niels something. He knew that he shouldn't tell him about mana. He asked me to tell the boss of 17th Street to beware of the man with the binoculars. When Ray returned to his tent, the children were already sound asleep, and he and Pale sat outside, the head of the dungeon children confident that the war would not last long. The hero asked if his friend thought the war would end in just a week. Pale didn't answer. He asked who Ray thought would win, and the guy said he didn't know because the two groups were practically equal in strength. He thought that Niels should win for the sake of the children's safety. If Hector wins this war, everyone will be in trouble. All the children of 17th Street will be sold into slavery at once. For a moment, the friends were silent. Then suddenly, Pale heard something. He said, "I think it's already started." Both boys stared intently into the darkness, trying to hear something else. The next second, their guesses were confirmed, and Pale asked if Ray had heard it too. The hero admitted to himself that he had never heard anything like this before, and he thought something was wrong. At that time, on 17th Street, Niels's men were trying to hold back the enemy attack. The two young men fired whole clips at the enemy, but it did not help. The golem was not afraid of firearms. After the attack, it did not have a single scratch. The next moment, the monster held out his hand, which showed the dark blue mana of a magician. The golem pointed this magical weapon directly at the young men from Niels's brigade. This attack could only be compared to an explosion, and both men ended up on the ground. One of them could not believe that this was really happening. The golem's eyes glowed with blue magical light, and it came too close. The monster's hand was rapidly approaching the frightened man's head. Unfortunately, he could not be saved, and blood splashes sprinkled everything around him. A magician wearing a binocular watched the golem's actions, and he told the young man who accompanied him that it smelled like dung. The monster approached his master and received praise. The sorcerer ordered his creature to cleanse everything around him. Ray noticed that the sound they heard was getting louder. Pale tried to stop his friend. He grabbed him by the arm and asked where he was going. The hero replied that today was not the usual day. He wanted to find out something, and the head of the dungeon children asked for permission to go with him. But Ray forbade him to do so. He asked Pale to wait for his return here. Their loud argument woke up one of the boys, who came out of the tent and asked why the brothers were awake. Pale patted the boy's head and apologized for waking him up, promised to be back soon, and asked him to go back to sleep. When the child returned to the tent, Ray turned to his friend. Before he could say anything, the head of the dungeon children agreed to stay with the kids. The young man understood that they should not be left alone, but this did not make him less concerned about Ray. He asked him not to go too far and to come back as soon as he found out what was happening there. The hero promised to come back soon, but later he got to the scene and froze in his tracks, with a fire raging around him and the bodies of the dead lying on the ground. Ray did not look at his feet and stepped into a red puddle. Suddenly, the young man came across the appointed man from Niels's team, who was still alive. The hero asked him what happened here, and he recognized the guy. He said that those bastards brought a golem with them. The monster was controlled by a man with binoculars, whom Ray had warned about today. The wounded man's eyes were closing. He could barely speak, and his last words were that they could not resist. The last breath, and the soldier of the 17th Street Brigade fell silent forever. Ray was silent. He didn't feel any emotions, but he realized that things were bad. This man died protecting the children of these streets. The hero stretched out his hand and closed his eyes. Raindrops fell on the calm face of the murdered man. Ray looked down at the ground and saw a knife under his feet, so he decided to pick it up. After looking around the street, the hero realized that at this rate, Niels's brigade was losing. The hero decided that it was in his best interest to help the boss of 17th Street. At that time, the bridge under which the children's dungeon hideout was located was in terrible danger. Ray could not have predicted that this would happen, but his absence cost someone's life. Some of the kids didn't even have time to wake up, it happened so fast. Pale clutched the little one in his arms, trying to protect him, and he looked into the face of danger, realizing that death was unavoidable. The golem pointed a hand with almost black mana directly at the defenseless children. The next moment there was an energy shot. Pale had time to mentally ask Ray to never come back here. Meanwhile, the hero continued to look around the center of 17th Street. He realized that he was late. Every second he came across the bodies of Niels's men, and the brigade was defeated. The only thing that inspired at least some optimism was the fact that Ray had not found his boss, and he could only hope that he was still alive. Suddenly, the hero froze in place. He felt an explosion behind him from the direction where he had left the children. He looked around and immediately realized that the worst had happened. He broke down on the spot, rushing in the direction of his tent. Ray saw the golem from a distance near their temporary shelter. The young man's breath caught in his throat as he realized what had happened. The monster was standing with its back to him, and instead of their tent, a black hole was visible. Everything around was red. The golem perfectly fulfilled the order of its owner. Although Ray could not feel emotions, he understood what had happened while he was away. The hero's mana became fiery. He no longer controlled himself. Armed only with a dagger, he rushed at the stout golem. The magical monster sensed the danger and managed to intercept Ray. A bare hand clutched the guy's body, and blood spurted from his mouth. The monster swung and threw the hero against the wall. The young man gathered his strength into a fist and managed to sit up, with only one thought in his head. He needed to make sure that the children were okay, because he had to be on time. He closed it and heard Josephine's voice calling his name cheerfully. Most likely the hero lost consciousness. He was delirious, so he saw this place without destruction and red marks. Cheerful, smiling children ran to meet the hero. They called Brother Ray over to them, wanted to show him something. The girls of their company were also happy to see him. They were surprised that the hero had returned so soon. The young man silently looked at everything around him and tried to understand what was a dream and what was reality. Suddenly, Ray saw Pale. The leader of the dungeon children said he didn't want the hero to come back. Suddenly, the picture changed, and instead of smiling faces of his friends, he saw something horrible. They were lying motionless on the floor of the tent, covered with red spots. And in front, right before the exit, there was a bloody Pale, clutching Josephine to his chest. Corden and Miles died immediately, before they could even wake up. The hero could not believe his own eyes. Could it really have happened? He held out his hand as if hoping to wake the children. The reality was too horrifying, and Ray believed that he had not yet had time to repay them for everything his friends had done for him. The soulless golem watched as its victim stretched out his hands to the dead child. Suddenly, Ray caught himself thinking that he was constantly hearing a strange sound that was also heard on the battlefield. Now, in the face of danger, he realized that all those people on 17th Street had also been destroyed by the golem. Children died at the hands of this monster. He killed the people of Nilsa and the civilians in the area without mercy. At that moment, the hero vowed to himself that he would definitely take revenge for them. Ray managed to think about it in a split second, before the golem managed to hit him with its mana. The young man told himself that he had to find the strength to move forward. It was at this moment that something incredible happened. The car flew over the hero's head and crashed into the monster. The hero did not expect this turn of events, as he was used to relying on himself. He watched as the golem lost its balance and fell to the ground. The car stopped, but the driver was not yet visible. Finally, the door opened, and it was Niels himself, saving Ray's life for the second time in the last few days. He rushed to the guy because he realized that he could not get to his feet on his own. Niels quickly examined Ray and realized that the boy's bones were intact. The hero tried to say something, but could only get one word out, children. The man looked in the direction where the children's tent had been until recently. Anger overwhelmed Niels, and he clenched his fists, trying to calm the unbearable pain. The boss of 17th Street told Ray that he was sorry. The man believed he was to blame for what happened. He was late. The hero disagreed because he believed that it was he who had not saved the children. The usually calm Niels was overcome with emotion. The man did not hold back. He went over and hugged the boy who had just suffered a terrible loss. After calming down a bit, Ray asked his boss what happened to his subordinates, and he replied that they were all dead. Niels could not have imagined that the dastardly Hector would call on sorcerers from other sectors to help him. The young man asked what the man planned to do next. The boss planned to return to 17th Street and look for survivors. As soon as Niels finished his sentence, a powerful blue mana cut into his chest. Such a sight could have puzzled anyone, let alone a teenager. It was the golem again, revenging himself on Niels for his fall and making a big hole inside the 17th Street boss. The creature's eyes were burning with red fire. It was controlled by magic. Ray saw the life leaving Niels's eyes, and there was nothing he could do. Red liquid from the body of his rescuer flew at the hero. The boss tried to say something, but he was exhausted. The next moment, he lost the ability to stand and fell on top of Ray. The hero hugged his older comrade's back, and his hand fell into the void. There should be a man's heart there, but she destroyed it with a golem. Ray's memory immediately recalled their training together. The young man recalled how much fun it was to have lunch together after the grueling exercise. Every time they met, Niels would put his hand on Ray's head and smile. The heart of the missing hero was truly fiery. The heart of a strong man who never forgot about the weak. Now no one can save Ray from another golem attack. But the death of Niels awakened something in the young man's body, and he promised to take revenge on all those responsible for today's tragedy. Black rain, blood, and sweat. This is the formula for this terrible night. The hero was still lying pressed down by the body of his dead friend. He called him by name, but it was all in vain. Niels was dead. Ray's mind flashed to the idea that if this was a bad dream, let it end as soon as possible. But it was a terrible, bizarre reality, where the young man was always threatened by a ruthless golem. The hero didn't realize what he was doing. He held out his bloody hand. His crimson mana met the blue energy that controlled the monster. The golem was controlled by a monocle-wearing magician. This creature had no mind of its own. It only obediently followed instructions. But Ray couldn't control his thirst for revenge now. It seemed to be tearing him apart from the inside. Where two powerful energies met, a powerful confrontation ensued. The hero's mana has changed, and in this short period of time, it has become more aggressive. Ray spoke like a mantra. He is different from a golem. He is a human being with emotions. Hugging the body of his dead friend, the hero sent such a powerful wave at the monster that he was not capable of before. His mana, like hot lava, consumed and melted the golem's body. Revenge gave him strength, and Ray was able to destroy Hector's main weapon. A molten trace of the young man's hot energy remained on the asphalt. The hero still didn't believe that Niels was dead, so he tried to wake him up. Ray didn't want to believe that he had lost all his friends on that terrible night. He told his boss on 17th Street that he shouldn't die. But suddenly, something beyond comprehension happened. Niels opened his eyes and asked the guy to stop shaking him. The man said he was sure he would not die a peaceful death, but he was not going to die today. He thought that he had no regrets, because he had managed to do a lot for someone who had started out as a miserable beggar. I wonder if he had started trying earlier, if things would have turned out differently. Niels told Ray that he started working on himself around his age. The boy asked his friend to wait. He would bring the medicine from his car, but the latter grabbed the teenager by the arm. The boss of 17th Street asked the kid to leave the place with a smile, and now there's nothing to keep him here. Ray should strive for a better life. He deserves it. Niels always considered him a little brother and took care of him as best he could. He tells the boy to paddle upstream and be careful on the rapids. The man believes in the talented Ray. He is sure that he will overcome all obstacles on the way to a happy future. After making one last effort over his frail body, Niels put this into the boy's hand. In the hero's palm, there was a key and a piece of paper. The eyes of the 17th Street boss closed forever, and Ray was left all alone. This night was too much for the teenager's psyche. Rage and despair were the first emotions the hero experienced in his life. When the morning came, the hero was still sitting under the bridge, unable to leave the place. He tried to organize his thoughts, but it was all in vain. The shock was too much. Ray moved his arms. Everything hurt. Every movement was difficult. The young man looked at his hands, which seemed to be numb, as if he had slept for a long time, so the teenager's nervous system was trying to cope with the shock. The mere memory of what happened last night awakens all of the hero's emotions at once. They helped him to overcome the golem, but now there is no need to go through it again. Ray has taken revenge on the monster that destroyed all his friends in one night. But that's not all. The people who are no less guilty of these horrors continue to live. The hero tried to concentrate on his own emotions. He realized something was wrong. Today, he will easily be able to ignite the flame in his own hand. The stronger the guy's rage, the more flames he can ignite, which means that the power of his emotions interacts with the power of magic. But the mana is still not constant. As soon as Ray is distracted, the fire disappears. The young man put his hand on his face, saying he needed to calm down and everything would work out. The hero opened his eyes and looked at his own hand. Last night he lost friends but gained emotions. Having done what he could for his fallen friends, he realized that it was time for him to do the same. Before leaving this terrible place, he must avenge all those who died that night. Ray was determined to fulfill his promise to himself. The hero quickly reached the main square of 17th Street, where Hector's men were already in charge. The store owner, an acquaintance of the boys, told his friend that because of the victory of Hector's group, everything would be more difficult now. The boss of 18th Street, now 17th Street, was standing by his car talking to his henchmen, and he did not feel threatened. In the conversation, he mentioned Niels, who could have survived if he had agreed to fulfill the terms of their negotiations. It was at this moment that Ray's eyes turned red, and a powerful mana enveloped the Avenger's entire body and focused on his weapon. The hero was about to attack Hector when a heavy palm fell on his shoulder. The young man had no time to talk, so he turned and attacked the intruder. Turning around, Ray immediately recognized the man. It was Hector's right-hand man, Humphrey, whom they had met at the warehouse. The man had an excellent reaction and managed to jump away in time without suffering significant injuries. Humphrey shouted, ordering the teenager to stop. But Ray was consumed with a thirst for revenge. The young man was convinced that Hector's entire group was going to die. Swinging his trophy dagger, he attacked Humphrey again and again. His movements were quick and precise. The man also recognized the teenager, but he could not understand how he did it. This boy wasn't that strong before, but he was able to improve his skills in a few days. For the first time, Humphrey was afraid that he might lose to the child. Ray was not going to wait any longer. He swiftly attacked the enemy, stabbing him in the shoulder. Despite all his skill, the young man realized too late that his shoulder had been set up on purpose. Thus, Gumption was able to grab the boy. He told the hero that he should not choose to die for something as stupid as revenge. Judging by the man's strange behavior, he did not intend to attack the young man. Calling Ray the ghost of 17th Street, Humphrey said he had a proposition for him. The man admitted that he had been following the young man for a long time, and he wanted Ray to listen to him. The guy didn't say a word, but he didn't run away either. He looked at Gumption with expectation. There were also rumors that he was called a silent man because he silently and efficiently performed his duties. Ray thought that the gambler now had such a desperate look on his face, as if he wasn't going to cheat. The hero asked what Humphrey was going to offer him. The man said he wanted Ray to leave Sector 50 as soon as possible, and the young man wanted to know why he should do so. The next moment, Hector's right-hand man said something incredible. He asked the boy to find his younger brother. Hector sold the boy to the City of Magicians, and he needs to be rescued. The boss promised to tell us about his whereabouts if Humphrey worked for him for 10 years, and he's still in this team because of that. Now his brother should be about Ray's age. The hero asked why he should accept the offer. Humphrey answered because the young man knew how to use magic. After their fight in the warehouse, he has no doubt about it. But now, even with his magic, Ray won't be able to overcome Hector. After all, there is always a strong magician next to the boss of 18th Street. The hero saw Humphrey's blue-black mana, which meant that the man was very afraid. He said that Hector was being guarded by an unusual magician, a demon. Anyone who disagrees with something immediately freezes. Once a sorcerer even drowned a boy by placing his head in a bubble of water. He is an incredibly cruel and powerful mage, and it will be difficult to defeat him. Humphrey believed that Ray should leave this place for a while. He had to survive and become stronger to be able to take revenge, and the hero agreed with the man's words. The young man had never studied magic and simply relied on his own intuition, while his opponent was an expert, so there was no chance of winning. Humphrey has heard that the City of Wizards is located upstream of the Elton River, a place only a wizard can get to. The man handed Ray a bag with money in it, which he had been saving all his life, and a piece of paper with his brother's name and description. The hero was surprised to find out why Gumption trusted him with such a sum, since he might not be able to keep his promise. Hector's right-hand man replied that he knew the boy, and that he was not someone who would break his own words. In addition, having seen Ray in action, he is sure that he will be able to reach the higher sectors. He believes in him. These words of Humphrey reminded the boy of Niels's last wish. The hero realized that the man was counting on his help. Ray was in no hurry to answer, even though he had already made a decision. Humphrey could not stand the tension and shouted, "The other members of the group would be here soon. The guy should decide soon." The hero replied that he had one condition. The man has to promise that he will take care of the bodies of his dead friends who remained under the bridge. Only then will he find his brother. Humphrey agreed to this condition without hesitation, and he will definitely do everything. Ray took the money and left, telling the man to wait for him. After taking a few steps, the young man broke into a run, moving to meet the sun, upstream, away from Sector 50. Humphrey watched Ray go, believing in his heart that the boy would return with his brother. When he reached the intersection of 16, 17, 18, and 19 streets, the hero stopped. He needs to catch his breath and check for a tail, and extra eyes are not needed now. Looking back, the young man saw an old acquaintance and decided to approach her. It was the blind storyteller Viola, a woman who could not see him but had excellent hearing. The hero threw a coin into a tin can at the old woman's feet. He wanted to ask her something. Sometimes not enough, so Viola must answer quickly. The woman recognized Ray's voice and asked what he wanted to know. The young man asked if the story about the rainbow that the storyteller told the children was not a fiction. Is it true that if you find the end of the rainbow, you can make a wish and it will come true? At that moment, the hero remembered how he first heard about the rainbow from little Josephine. Ray asked the kid what a rainbow was, and he explained that it was a long, colorful ribbon that appeared in the clouds after it rained. The child compared the rainbow to a brightly colored donut from which a piece was bitten off, and if you find the end of the rainbow, you can make a wish. The hero then got distracted from the story. He thought that these were fairy tales for kids, which made Josephine very angry. He was thinking about something of his own, and he didn't believe the story at all, and the kid called him a fool. Only now, left alone with his own grief, did Ray realize that this fairy tale could be true. Viola answered that the rainbow does exist, but whether or not to make a wish is a personal matter. The hero looked at the woman's chest, where her mana was hiding in the cup. The energy was pure and calm as always. The same purple color, Ray couldn't tell if Viola was lying or telling the truth. The young man recalled Humphrey's words that a sorcerer had once looked for a rainbow here. The hero's fists are clenched, so the magician in the pince-nez is hunting for the rainbow, which means he has clear evidence of its existence. Ray asked the blind woman if he could find a rainbow. Would she be able to resurrect the dead? The woman smiled and answered ambiguously, "Who knows? They say that you can make a wish, and any wish will come true thanks to the magic of the rainbow. You just have to believe in it." These words of the storyteller encouraged Ray, and he decided that he had a chance to fix everything. Suddenly, Viola added, "No one knows where the rainbows are hiding. Probably their home is somewhere far away." The hero was a little upset, but sincerely thanked the woman for this information. As he was about to disappear, he advised the old storyteller to leave. The young man treated the old woman well and did not want her to suffer from Hector's gang. Some time passed and the hero reached the outskirts of the 50th sector, 23rd Street. Ray sat down to rest for a while, and he remembered that he had a piece of paper in his pocket that the dying Niels had left him. He ended up there, in the place his friend had indicated. The young man found a white car here, a greeting and last resort from the boss of 17th Street. Ray recalled their conversation when Niels promised to leave him a car to make it easier to leave Sector 50. The hero went to the car and the man also left him the keys. As soon as Ray took hold of the door handle, he heard someone ask him who he was behind him. A man in the uniform of Hector's henchman mistook the boy for Niels's henchman. He asked if the young man had received an order to bring the car. The guard was holding a syringe in his hand. His right arm was tied with a tourniquet. When the strange man received no response, he asked where Niels himself was. Ray thought that none of Hector's men were following him, and he shouldn't waste his precious time. Continuing to be silent, the hero pulled the door handle. The man was irritated by the boy's behavior, and he shouted out where he was going. He jumped up and ran to the car, but Ray was faster. He had already jumped into the car. After getting behind the wheel, the hero was about to slam the door. When the gap was very small, Hector's bodyguard managed to grab the door. He tried to pull Ray out of the car, and their confrontation continued for a moment. The furious henchman demanded that the young man open the door. The hero thought that last night he used too much mana. His empowering magic was over. We need to quickly concentrate our last strength and get rid of this obstacle to freedom. Ray's powerful red energy, like a laser weapon, hit the man right in the face. He lost his balance and flew to the ground, and now he could close the car door without any problems. The hero put his right hand on the gear lever. His foot went down on the gas pedal, and a new life awaited Ray. The car took off, leaving behind the body of Hector's bodyguard and the 50th sector. The young man was confidently holding the wheel. His way was to the city of magicians. The guy still could not believe that he would soon get out of this horrible place. 23rd Street was quickly left behind, and he was rapidly approaching the outskirts, with the unknown ahead. Outside of Sector 50, the scenery was no better, with devastation everywhere. A raven was sitting on a pile of garbage, watching the white car closely. Having driven a safe distance from the outskirts of his hometown, the hero stopped and decided to look in the trunk. Ray was surprised by what he saw. There was a lot of everything he needed for his trip. The young man thought that Niels had prepared well. Even after his death, he had taken care of him. The hero decided that it would take a few more days to reach the next sector. It's time to stop and rest for a bit as soon as he reaches the next town, as much as possible, to find out about the magic. Looking at the fire, Ray tried to structure the knowledge he had now. During his short life, he concluded that there are two main types of mana. The red one can be used without prior preparation. To get a different energy, you need to mix colors. Manipulating mana is quite difficult, but if Ray feels certain emotions, some types of energy are attracted faster. After surviving the night before, the young man concluded that rage is a very strong feeling. If you recall some events in your life that will awaken this feeling, the red mana will be activated faster. The hero tried this technique, but it didn't work out well. He concluded that for now, this is the maximum, because as soon as he loses concentration on the emotion, the mana disappears. Now it's time to try combinations of emotions. Mixing colors will give you a different type of energy. It was an interesting activity that completely absorbed the hero's attention. Trying to mix different types of mana, the young man made an interesting discovery. He looked at his hands, and the magic suddenly disappeared. Ray thought that mana types that can't mix destroy each other. Combining colors takes a lot of effort, and it requires a lot of moral strength. Ray realized that there are combinations that should work well, and that's what you should focus on. He didn't do it before because he didn't see the need, but now everything has changed. The hero's eyes reflected not an ordinary night sky. It was like the northern lights, and Ray admired it and thought that he had to improve his own skills faster now. Soon after, he continued on to the next sector. Throughout the day, the young man would stop to rest and have a snack. During each of his stops, Ray continued to combine different colors of mana. The young man learned how to create natural phenomena with the help of magic and was the first to make it snow. Then, using blue mana, the hero created a storm, and the dark blue energy helped to form hailstones. Ray was exhausted enough that night to call it a night. Stretched out on the roof of the car, he wondered if he could use magic more smoothly. If he could keep the mana in his heart and use it when necessary, the whole process would be more efficient. He remembered the rings he had seen around the magician's mana cup. The young man decided that he would look for such a way when he found himself in Sector 49. Meanwhile, on 17th Street, Sector 50, under the bridge, Hector's men were searching the area. They had been searching for hours, but it was all in vain. A magician with a binocular was sitting in a black car, and he asked Hector if they had found anything yet. One of the henchmen apologized and said that they would definitely find the golem. They just needed a little more time. The sorcerer ordered the boy to take his stick. The young man began to apologize and begged for more time. The golem would definitely find them. The sorcerer said angrily that he did not like people who did not understand him. The guard realized that the order would not end well for him, and he trembled with horror. But he didn't dare to obey the sorcerer, so he stretched out his hand and touched the stick. Suddenly, everything around him turned blue, and the man screamed in terror or pain. The next moment, the guard's hand turned into a piece of ice. A second later, the whole man turned back to the ice statue. This demonstration did not end the magician's anger. He pushed the man with his stick. The ice guard flew to the ground and broke into pieces. There were true rumors about the sorcerer. He was really ruthless. The magician believed that everyone around him had to obey his orders immediately and without arguing. He got out of the car and went to his place, where a trace remained on the asphalt after Ray's powerful attack. The man handed the sorcerer a piece and said it looked like a part of a golem. The sorcerer saw the remnants of mana in the air, and he immediately realized that magic had been used here, and that it had left a trace. He took a few steps forward and saw that a little further on, the residual concentration of magic was even greater. The mage sat down and touched the ground with his hand. Now he finally realized that the golem was destroyed. The man asked the guard who lived here, and he replied, "A bunch of street kids." This news stunned the sorcerer. He wondered if his golem had been destroyed by vagrants, and his assistant replied that the children must have left when the war began. The magician could not believe that an ordinary tramp could use magic, but the next moment a thought made him very happy. The sorcerer couldn't help but laugh out loud, and his behavior stunned the guard. He wondered if a homeless child from these streets could seriously use magic, if he had found a small combination of elemental mana on his own among the many variants of this world. Eventually, the magician decided that it was simply impossible. Another sorcerer must have come here and destroyed the golem, and he ordered to find out what really happened. The man with the monocle did not believe that an ordinary child from the street could have done it. But if he is wrong, and this is still possible, then he may be a genius whose destiny is to become the most powerful Archmage of this world. Finally, the day came when Ray reached the 49th sector. When he stood by the high fence, he remembered Niels's words. Sector 49 is like the hole they live in. It's a complete mess. The only difference between them is that it's bigger than 50, with taller buildings and more streets. All the lower sectors are similar to each other, but the higher up the river you go, the more noticeable the changes are. The hero mentally agreed with the words of his fallen friend. Sector 49 is really huge. Ray was a little confused because he had never been outside the 50th sector before. Everything around him seemed strange and unfamiliar. The first difference was that there were no golems here, as if they could only be found in Sector 50. The streets looked much neater than at home, with people walking everywhere. The hero saw a sign. He read it, 36th Street, which means that there are twice as many of them here as in Sector 50. Ray's main goal was to find information about magic and that wizard with the binoculars and his rings around the cup as quickly as possible. This will help the boy to improve his skills and become stronger in order to avenge his friends. His information about the colors of mana and the city of sorcerers is also interesting, and it would be nice to get some more money. For the time being, the hero has the money that Gumption gave him, but he doesn't know how long it will take to get there. Suddenly, the young man stopped, his attention drawn to an establishment. The neat sign said that it was Veronica's bookstore. The hero stopped to look at the sign and was surprised by the name. Ray thought that Veronica sounded like a human name. The young man had never been to a store like this before. He immediately recalled how Niels taught him to read, the man drawing different symbols in the sand and telling him what they were called. Drawing a circle, the boss of 17th Street explained that it meant the word brother. Niels asked Ray to repeat after him to help him remember. It was thanks to him that the hero learned to read, but he had never seen a book before. The hero was looking through the window into the store, the entire space filled with squares with something written on them. Suddenly, Ray heard a woman screaming, her voice coming from above. The young man looked up and saw a girl with red hair in the window, accusing the boy of breaking her window and coming to steal her books. The beautiful woman looked angry. She was sure that Ray was a criminal, and she was trying to chase him away to protect her store. The hero touched the glass of the shop window and thought that these squares were books. The girl screamed again, demanding that the young man leave. Ray looked at her cup and saw a bunch of colors. Red meant excitement, yellow meant joy, blue meant discomfort, dark green meant irritation. How can you feel so many emotions at once? The hero was brought out of his thoughts by the girl's scream, demanding that the guy get out of here as soon as possible. The young man looked at the stranger in silence, thinking she was strange. This behavior of Ray's really annoyed the beauty. The hero probably didn't notice that he called her strange out loud, which fueled the fire even more. The redhead kept screaming, but the guy didn't pay any more attention to her. He thought it was not the time to be distracted. The young man was walking down the street, and the locals paid attention to him because he was different from them. Ray was walking fast, but he managed to notice various details. For example, when the hero walked down a dark alley, 3 pairs of eyes were watching him closely. The young man noticed curiosity and surprise in the boy's eyes. Ray decided that this was to be expected, since he was a stranger on their streets, and they probably thought he was a provocateur. In the end, the hero concluded that everything here is the same as in his native Sector 50. He returned to his car, which he left in a deserted place to spend the night. He lay down in the driver's seat and thought that after spending the whole day in Sector 49, he hadn't found anything about magic. As Ray was falling asleep, he thought that tomorrow he would have to explore more territory. Suddenly, a sound from outside drove Ray from his sleep. The 3 guys who were following him from a dark alley hid behind a pile of stones. The hero was not surprised at all, he thought. Finally, they are here. Ray was able to tell by ear that there were 4 young men. They gathered courage and came out of their hiding places. The young bandits were discussing what to do with the boy. Kill him or just knock him out. Their leader believed that there was food in the car, and they needed to find the keys to it. Ray got tired of waiting, and the next events happened too quickly. The young men did not expect to be rebuffed. The hero was surprised. The leader of this gang received a powerful blow right in the face. He lost his footing and flew to the ground. His associates were stunned. Ray was too strong an opponent for ordinary street kids. The hero moved with lightning speed, not giving them a chance. After being hit in the stomach, the second young man screamed in pain and horror. He lost his balance, hitting his back painfully on the ground. It was the turn of the third member of this gang to strike. Ray intercepted a piece of metal pipe with one hand that was about to hit him. The hero easily took his weapon from the guy and threw it on a pile of scrap. The young man warned his partner that he should clench his teeth. Having lost his only weapon, the young bandit looked very scared. Ray decided that these heroes needed to be taught a lesson. After giving them a good beating, he asked them how many streets their gang was registered on. The guys were silent, but the hero was going to hear the whole truth. Losing patience, Ray repeated his question. The leader of this gang looked at the young man in silence, with a large gash on his head under his cap. Ray was not going to wait long. He slapped the guy again. This was enough for him to finally start answering questions, and the leader said that they controlled 3 streets in the 49th sector. The hero was interested in the details, asked what they were, and looked at the boy's cup carefully. The leader called out the street numbers, 23, 24, 25, and several shades of energy combined in his chest, from black to green, signifying anxiety, doubt, and fear. Ray immediately realized that what he said was a lie, and he stepped on the guy's hand with his boot. The leader screamed in pain, and the hero's action made the other 2 robbers tremble in terror. The young man begged for forgiveness, and Ray looked at him carefully again. He realized that he still hadn't heard the truth, so he decided to push. Another member of the gang could not stand this pressure. The guy shouted that they actually controlled 14 streets, and their organization had 52 members. The leader's name is Kedrick. The base is located in an abandoned factory. The hero thought that 14 streets is much more than he expected. He ordered the guy who had just told him everything to raise his head. Ray asked the young man's name and what orders the leader gave them. Neshu, the boy's name, said that they were ordered to beat a stranger and steal all the food, and also let Ray know that their leader sees everything. Just at this moment, a fourth bandit with a dagger in his hand is lurking behind the hero. The next moment, with a belligerent shout, he viciously attacked the guy from behind. At this point, the young sorcerer was able to activate his defense mana. The attacker was unable to do any harm to the hero, as a strong wind began to rage around him. One of the bandits thought that the dust was getting into his eyes, preventing him from seeing clearly. His attack failed, and he himself was beaten. Other gang members continued to watch the events in fear. Ray decided to deliver a message to their leader. The hero was ruthless with them. He wanted the guys to tell the boss. He was not the only one who saw everything. The next day, the hero went back to the city, and he realized one thing for sure. The people of Sector 49 also know nothing about magic, but he learned something interesting. Books are paper on which various information is stored. This gave Ray the idea that books could be about magic. Suddenly, 3 people crossed his path, strangers who wanted him to go with them. One of them added that they did not come to fight, so there was no need to strain. Ray asked if the boys were with the men who hunted him yesterday. His hunch was confirmed. Last night he beat Anthony, Horn, and Melber to a pulp. The main one of the 3 said that their leader liked their incredible fighting style and wanted to meet them. The guy took a piece of paper from his pocket with a note from his boss. He asked his associates who could read it, because the leader asked them to pass on verbatim what was written there, and it turned out that they were all illiterate. The hero took the note away because he could read, and this fact impressed the trio. Ray was deep in his writing and for a minute did not pay attention to his new friends. The guys were stunned, wondering if this stranger was not from the street. Otherwise, how he had learned to read. Only the boss and Waver could do it in their gang. The note contained an offer for Ray to work for the leader of this organization, and if he accepted the invitation, he would never need food again. The boys wanted to know what was written in the note, but instead of answering, the hero asked how they choose a leader. The small-time gangsters said that this happens after a fight and the boss becomes stronger. Ray was quite satisfied with this answer, so he turned and left. The hero looked around and told the boys that he was ready to meet their leader. Later, they reached the base of the Kedrick group, which was located in an abandoned factory. The main one of the 3 showed them the door, explaining that they were going in. He went first, inviting the guests to follow. Later, all 4 of them found themselves on the factory premises. Ray followed his new friends until he found himself in a large room where a fire was burning and a crowd of guys had gathered. The leader of this organization, Kedrick, was sitting in an armchair by the fire. The hero was curious to see the local boss. When he saw the guest, he got up and greeted him warmly. Kedrick was a tall young man, and if he became the leader of this organization, he was the strongest among the entire crowd of young men. Ray said his name in response, and he looked at his new acquaintance carefully. The next moment, the young man saw something that struck him. In Sector 50, he had seen a mixture of mana residue, but today was the first time Ray had seen a ring with so much magical energy. Kedrick asked the hero to sit down, because he was here as a guest, not an enemy. The young man sat down in a chair, remaining calm as always, even though a dozen hostile bandits had gathered behind him. There was not a hint of a friendly smile on the guys' faces. Ray thought that Kedrick did a good job of showing who was stronger right away. They were about the same age, and he already had such good qualities of a true leader. The local boss said that when he saw the new guy in person, he had no doubts about his choice. He could tell that Ray had nerves of steel. He wanted to know where the guy came from in his car. The hero decided to tell the truth, so he honestly answered that he was from Sector 50. The leader's henchmen were stunned by the news. It was evident from the expressions on their faces. There were whispers in the crowd that this stranger was lying. They had never heard anyone from Sector 50 rise before, but rather the opposite. Kedrick raised his hand, indicating to his men that it was time to shut up. The leader said that if Ray's words are true, it's just incredible. He really wants to get such a person in his organization. The hero asked about the organization. Kedrick confirmed his words, as he has a plan to join a real organization. It's called the Red Mercenaries, a super famous organization from the 45th sector. There is an agreement that their gang will join them when the number of members reaches 66. Kedrick wanted to hear Ray's opinion on the matter, and he believed that was enough to convince him to join their ranks. The hero's expression didn't change, and he replied that it was an interesting story. Ray added that it was not difficult to join the group, and the leader said it was a wise decision. But the young man hastened to add that he refused to work for someone weaker than himself. An oppressive silence hung in the abandoned factory. Kedrick's face no longer looked friendly, his voice had a steely edge to it, and he asked if Ray had just called him weak. Kedrick repeated his question. Did Ray really say that he was weaker than him? The hero replied that in the 50th sector, leaders were elected by strength, not by their ability to scratch their tongues. After saying these provocative words, the young man waited for the reaction of the local boss. One of Kedrick's henchmen could not listen in silence to his leader being insulted. He attacked Ray with his fists, but the boss stopped the guy in time, grabbing him by the neck. Squeezing the man's throat, he angrily asked who gave him the right to speak. Kedrick asked if he didn't know that a leader hates to be interrupted. At this point, Ray watched the powerful red mana that enveloped the boss. It was empowering magic. The hero concluded that it didn't look like he was using it himself. The source of this powerful mana was a ring that the young man immediately noticed. Ray asked the guys standing next to him when it would end, and they told him when someone stopped. After some thought, the hero decided that he could break this magical object. He constantly saw active red mana coming from the stone. Using his own magic, he blocked the artifact's energy, and Kedrick immediately lost his own power. The boss apologized to the guest, saying that he was suddenly angry, and Ray noticed a sharp change in emotions. The leader offered to continue the conversation from where they left off, and the new acquaintance said that Kedrick was weaker than him. He was ready to check it out, which was exactly what Ray was waiting for. The hero got to his feet and boldly declared that he was stronger. His confidence made the local boss even more angry, and he could no longer contain his emotions. Kedrick asked his henchmen if they also believed that their leader was weaker than this bastard, and the guys shouted that they believed in their boss. Ray managed to notice that the ring reacts to changes in the emotions of its owner. Judging by the fact that the man didn't react to the sudden mana restriction, he doesn't know what the ring is doing to him. Kedrick told his new friend that he was ready to show him his strength. Ray offered to fight for the leadership position, and if he lost, he would work for him. The local boss smiled and agreed, saying that they would measure their strength in a week. The battle will take place in front of everyone. Not only local guys, but also people from other groups will come to watch. This way, they could be sure of each other's strength, and Ray agreed to these terms without hesitation. The young man decided to ask where Kedrick got the ring. He replied with a smile that he would find out if he won, but then the boss confidently added that this would never happen. The next day, Ray went for another walk through the streets of Sector 49. He was constantly thinking about the magic ring. Suddenly, his instinct for self-defense told him that danger was lurking behind him. The hero managed to look back in time to catch a large stone that was flying straight at the back of his head. They were old acquaintances, 4 guys, and one of them asked who allowed a stranger to wander around their sector. The next moment, Ray heard voices from the other side and was surrounded. They threatened him not to even think about running away, because they have their people everywhere. One of the bandits continued to say something when Ray ordered him to shut up. He stretched his hand forward and offered the speaker a one-on-one fight. In a matter of minutes, this gang was finished. The young man thought that wherever he went, the people around him provoked him into a fight. It seems that rumors travel fast here. Everyone knows about the upcoming fight with Kedrick. His group does not touch Ray, as they had agreed. But this does not apply to other local groups. Their pride does not allow them to simply let a stranger walk their streets. Other groups even join together to keep an eye on him, and everything goes as Ray planned. The more he gets used to magic, the stronger it becomes. Now, to knock an opponent down, he only needs to move his fingers. With the experience he gained, Ray can use magic faster, while expending less mental energy. The young man was convinced that provoking fights was a good idea. Suddenly, the hero noticed that someone was watching him, and he asked how long it would last. The young man who was hiding in the shadows said nothing, just pulled his hat over his eyes. Finally, the guy dared to come out of the shadows and spoke. Gray hair, emotionless face. He's a hunter, isn't he? Ray didn't say anything, as he didn't know who the hunters were or what this strange young man meant. The hero noticed that the boy was younger than the others, but he was wandering around alone, and he didn't seem to be a good fighter. Ray advised the boy to take off his glasses because he would hurt himself if he broke them. The young man put his hands forward, demonstrating that he did not come to fight. This statement surprised the hero, and he stopped there and looked at the stranger expectantly. The kid asked Ray to calm down because he was not a fighter. The hero was surprised to ask what he needed in that case. The young man decided that it would be polite to introduce himself first. His name is Philip. The guy said he had something to offer Ray. This offer interested the hero, so he did not hesitate to follow Philip, who told him that he worked near the eastern garbage pit. For some reason, he called Ray a hunter again, and added that he had heard a lot about him. The hero decided that he was given this nickname after he dealt with those guys. Finally, they reached a building and stopped at a closed door. Philip opened the door, inviting the hunter to follow him in. They found themselves in a factory where a bunch of guys were working. Judging by what the local workers were saying, one could conclude that the factory was engaged in the manufacture of shoes. But in reality, it wasn't like that. Philip said it was a hotel and he was its owner. Ray said at first glance, "It seems like there are more than 100 people here." And his new friend replied, "To be precise, including those who work outside, They have 186 people. They all have something in common, and the hero finally realized it. The young man decided that it would be difficult for these young people to join other groups. They were all too young, if not small. Philip said that there are many mines in Sector 49, which means that many adults are dying. Because of this, there is a lot of work in the city, but no one to do it. That's why shops are happy to hire children. There are so many of them that even street groups can't cope. So, instead of maintaining a monopoly on working with several groups, Philip agreed to pay them a little and send them workers if they needed them. The guy was a kind of broker. He even organized a roof over the children's heads, of course, not for free. Ray was surprised that he had created all this himself, and Philip replied that he had no idea how hard he had to work to create such an infrastructure. Suddenly, a young man, whom Philip called Jonathan, ran up to them. The hotel owner asked how the work at the restaurant was going, and the boy replied that everything was fine. No one was touching him there. He wanted to give Philip the month's payment. Both of them looked pleased, and Ray looked surprised. The guy with the glasses took out a notebook and pen to make a note. Money loves a bill. Philip apologized to the hunter and explained that he needed to record everything. It was a notebook on hotel management, and the young man noticed that his new acquaintance was interested and offered to look at his notes. The hero did not refuse. He picked up the notebook and carefully flipped through the pages. The next moment, Ray found a record of himself, and he told Philip that he had been snooping around. The hotel owner did not expect that his new friend could read. The young man decided to apologize for his notes. He said it was not an excuse, but he liked to watch people. Ray replied that they were complete opposites, and even if he tried, he wouldn't understand. The hero told the boy that he shouldn't apologize because he didn't care, and Philip was glad that the hunter wasn't angry with him. For some time, the new acquaintances walked in silence until they reached a closed door, where two men stood. They were surprised to see Philip and a stranger. One of them asked if the boy didn't know that they wouldn't miss the first person they met. The bespectacled man told them that they were looking for the same hunter, and he promised that he could bring him to visit. After that, they were admitted to a nice apartment without any problems. Philip explained that he uses it himself, and Ray can feel at home here. The hero said that when he first heard about the guy, he thought he was a fraud. The bespectacled man replied that he was not a liar. Trust was the most important thing in business. The money can always be returned, but having lost his trust, it will be much harder to do so, Ray thought. This guy thinks like an adult, not a teenager. The young man was waiting for Philip to make him an offer. The guy could barely contain his nervous trembling. The hunter still scared him a little, but if Philip wanted to stay in the black, he had to overcome his fear. Finally, he pulled himself together and looked up, boldly looking directly into Ray's face. Philip said that he had a proposal for the hunter. They should become business partners. But then he added, it should happen when Ray beats Kedrick and becomes the new leader of the group. The hero was in no hurry to answer. He was looking carefully at the small businessman's cup. The young man noticed that he had less black mana than before. Black meant fear, so Philip was afraid of Ray and then gained courage. He asked if the young man really believed in his victory, and he replied that he could not rule out this possibility, but that Ray had very good chances. The hero wanted to know why Philip thought so. The bespectacled man replied that he had a hunch, and he was used to trusting his own intuition. As he said earlier, he likes to observe people, and if you look at a person's behavior and habits, you can understand more about them. For example, when Ray talks to people, he almost always looks away and looks at his chest instead of his eyes. Although Philip does not know the reason for this behavior, it is possible that the hunter has some kind of trauma related to people's eyes or faces. He decided to go back to work and got down to business. But Ray was interested in what other habits Philip had noticed. The young man replied that when a hero comes around a corner, he always steps on his right foot, perhaps because he is subconsciously ready to meet the enemy, since he is right-handed. Ray was amazed because it was the first time he had heard such a precise and detailed analysis of himself and his behavior. Until now, people have been judging him superficially, considering him strange. They were simply afraid that he was different, not like everyone else. The hero recalled how many guys from the 50th sector said that something was wrong with him. He was seen as cold and frightening and never understood. Even now, apart from rage and sadness, he has to concentrate to feel emotions. For some reason, Philip seems to be the key to his own emotional growth in the future. At this time, the bespectacled man read out what he had noticed about Kedrick's behavior. For example, Philip noticed that he often succumbs to emotions in fights, and Ray, on the contrary, calculates the movements of his opponent. Before he could finish reading, the hunter replied that he agreed. The hotel owner was stunned. He wanted to talk about his payment like a real businessman, but Ray said let him decide the matter himself. This turn of events made Philip very happy, and he was already rubbing his hands together, calculating his future profits. It was at this point that the hero added that he had one condition. He noticed that the bespectacled man had a lot of connections here, so Ray wants Philip to find something for him. 2 days passed, and the hero was sitting by his car. At that time, there was a foreman under her, and he asked if Ray really came from Sector 50. From the state of the car, he would have believed it if he had been told that it was driving in the desert. By the way, Philip likes Ray very much. The mechanic drew this conclusion from the fact that the bespectacled man rarely sends someone as experienced as he is. While working on his car, the guy asked his new friend to hand over the keys and a 6mm nut. Ray looked at the instruments but was in no hurry to fulfill the request. He had been training hard for the past few days, so he decided to use magic. With the help of blue mana, the hero managed to lift the necessary tools into the air. The mechanic looked to the side and saw that everything he needed was lying next to him, and he was very surprised. The young man asked his new friend when he managed to take them, but Ray did not answer. When the sun was already high in the sky, the mechanic finally came out from under the car. He said that everything was ready. He had just dealt with the overheating of the engine, replaced the cooler with something better, and now everything would be fine. The mechanic secretly told the hero that he had secretly borrowed this, the most expensive cooler from the store where he works, and Ray was very grateful for the job. The guy replied that it was not difficult for him, because it was Philip's request, and he was their savior. Without him, they wouldn't have gotten any work at all, so they didn't mind a small portion of their profits. Ray thought the bespectacled man was surprisingly popular. The mechanic recalled that Philip had asked him to give Ray a note. The bespectacled man told the master that it would be difficult for him to memorize the entire message, so he handed him a piece of paper. He gathered his things and waved goodbye, adding that they would see each other again. The hero plunged into reading Philip's message. In their last meeting, Ray asked the bespectacled man to find information about magic and wizards. The hotel owner said he had already heard of them and promised to collect everything not only about them, but also about the insects associated with them, which shouldn't take long. Finally, Philip smiled. He was confident that he would cope with the hunter's task. Now, reading the note, he was amazed that the bespectacled man had managed to gather so much information in just 2 days. The message said that a wolf man from the Wolf Bakery lived on 2th Street. He was 42 years old, carrying a heavy bag with one hand. On 8th Street lives Andrew from Kenny's store, 23 years old, a clerk, eating dry white bread without any emotion. Ray decided that this was interesting information, but he needed to check it out. The next day, the hero went to 2nd Street to follow the baker. He really looked quite strong because he was carrying 2 heavy boxes of food on his shoulders. The hero looked closely at his cup to see if this man really had magic. Ray came to the conclusion that he could be ruled out because there were no rings around the cup of mana. He crossed out the information about him, leaving him the last one on the list. The hero read Philip's note. Construction worker 32, 1, empty shopping district, name unknown, male, age between 30 and 40, often seen between the upper and underground city with food in his hand. One day, a worker accidentally dropped a pipe from the roof of a house almost on this man's head, but thanks to the wind, he managed to avoid death. It was at the moment of terrible danger that not even a shadow of surprise appeared on his face. Philip made a note that it was highly likely that this man would turn out to be a sorcerer. The hero continued on his way when he suddenly stopped, wondering where his feet had taken him. He looked at the bookstore he had come across on his first day in Sector 49, which was closed today. The 2 guys standing in front of the window said that they would never open like that because they were being stoned every day. Ray overheard the plans of these scoundrels. They said that they would get double the profit if the store was put up for sale, so they could not stop. One of the guys decided that this time they should throw a stone to the 2nd floor, not at the store, but at the owner's house, so they could force them to move. The bastard took a swing, showing his partner how to break windows. It was at this moment that a window opened on the 2nd floor, and Ray's old friend, a red-headed beauty, appeared. She heard everything and shouted at the guys, demanding that they leave. Ray looked at the girl's mana, the light yellow color signifying courage and confidence. But judging by the amount of black mana, she was quite scared. The guys shouted out that they saw the girl shaking with fear. She was fine, she had a house, and they had no place to sleep. The girl's hands were shaking, but she bravely tried to shut these fools up. The next moment, the redhead barely managed to duck, and the stone almost hit her in the head. The girl exclaimed that her parents were sleeping, but the hooligans replied that they knew that only children and a sick old man were hiding in her house. The beauty could barely contain her horror, but she bravely shouted out, "Let them go!" Ray was still hiding around the corner, undecided whether to intervene. The second bastard shouted that this time he would aim at the girl's face. This act made the hunter change his mind. Having activated blue mana, he was about to intervene, but something strange happened. The red-haired beauty was a sorceress, and she was able to defend herself from a stone flying at her. The guys did not understand what happened, but it scared them. Judging by the expression on the girl's face, she herself was confused by what she had just done. The hero was stunned by what he saw. Had he finally found a magician? The two bandits froze in place. They had never seen anything like this before. But they quickly withdrew and decided perhaps they thought it was worth trying again. Only Ray realized that it was definitely magic. The red-headed sorceress still held her hands in front of her, demanding that the boys leave. The bold young man swung another stone, wanting to show who was the cool one, and his friend decided to join in. Now 2 stones flew at the girl at the same time. She looked confused and scared at the same time. The redhead closed her eyes, realizing that she would not be able to block all the stones at once. It was at this point that Ray intervened. He decided he had to help. The hero activated a protective blue mana and cast it on the second-floor window. The young man caused a fierce wind to rise, which changed the trajectory of the stones. One of them hit the villain right in the forehead. It was at this moment that Ray came out of his hiding place. He took a swing and hit another scumbag in the face with a stone. The hero threw the next stone in his hand and decided to teach the villains a good lesson. In revenge for the red-headed beauty, he raised his head and looked at her window. Ray politely said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and the girl was stunned to see him. The hero threw the bastards down the stairs, and they were badly injured. Red went outside. She was very grateful to the stranger for his help. The young man said that it was not necessary to thank her. He wanted to ask her something. Ray wanted to know if she was a magician, and the beauty asked him at the same time if he used magic. The two looked into each other's eyes, and they shared a common secret. Ruda was the first to recover and invited Ray to talk about it inside. It was his first time in a bookstore, and he was curious about everything. The beautiful girl said her name was Veronica, and this was her house. The young man also told me his name, and so they met. The girl apologized for yelling at the guy last time. She thought he was a stone-throwing bandit. The hero replied that it was all over. The situation was unclear. Veronica thanked him once again for today's help. If it wasn't for Ray, she would have been in serious trouble. The young man said that he didn't need to be so grateful. He just wanted to look around the bookstore, so he helped. His first goal was to gain some knowledge about magic, but to meet a magician here is a big deal. Ray asked where Veronica learned to use magic, and the beauty replied that her grandfather took her and her brothers and sisters. The hero asked her if her grandfather could also use magic, and the girl replied that he was a sorcerer. The young man asked if he could meet him, and Veronica replied that she would go upstairs and tell her grandfather about their savior. Suddenly, she noticed a cut on Ray's face. The hero replied that he seemed to be a little hurt, but everything was fine. But Veronica was against it. If you leave it like that, you can get infected. The girl came over to get a good look at the scratch, and she touched Ray's face. The beauty did not need a band-aid or antiseptic. She knew how to heal wounds with magic. The hero rolled his eyes, watching the scratch disappear from his skin. It took no more than a minute, during which time the cut completely disappeared. Veronica was happy that she was able to help her rescuer. Ray jumped to his feet. He wants to understand how she did it. The girl had just moved white mana and then created light from it and healed him. During his training, the hero tried to move white mana, but he failed, as it only responds to confidence, or when someone sacrifices themselves, at which point Ray remembered his dead friends. All these emotions are far from him, because he has not yet learned to feel the full range of human feelings. Veronica replied that she had just used the magic of healing, that's all. The girl asked her new friend what he meant by white mania. The hero recalled the words of Niels, who had never heard of color. His mage friend said that it was invisible, and Ray decided that mages really could not see it. Veronica said she didn't understand what he was talking about. Perhaps the young man was referring to the element of regeneration. He had never heard of it. The redhead explained that the element she had just used was called the regeneration element, and that healing magic usually uses only this one, although more additional elements can be added to it. The hero asked how many elements there were, and Veronica replied that there were a lot of them, more than 20, if we take into account only natural elements, and if we pay attention to the others, the enhancement of manipulation and regeneration, we can find at least 100. Ray was happy because he had learned something new today, and he was curious what the girl's grandfather would say. He asked the redhead if her grandfather was on the second floor, and Veronica said that he was very ill and hardly ever got out of bed. The beauty asked her new friend to wait a minute. She would check if her grandfather was awake. The witch quickly ran up the stairs, promising to return soon. While Ray waited, he read the titles of the books around him. Kildrick's Travel Notes, The Interpretation of the Unconscious, on the Ontological Meaning of People. Touching the books, he thought that he had once heard that literature could be very expensive. The hero paid attention to his hands. They were very dirty, and Ray thought that he shouldn't touch books with such hands. If you think about it, the last time he bathed in the clear rain, He doesn't feel uncomfortable when it smells bad, but others probably will. The young man thought about Veronica, wondering if she hadn't smelled the odor or was too polite to say so. The hero looked around the room and saw something that interested him. It didn't look like books, but rather magazines. He read the title, The Doctrine of the Distribution of Elements into Sectors. The next magazine he was interested in was about the cause of the black rain. It was at this moment that Ray heard Veronica's footsteps coming down from the second floor. The redhead looked around the store and did not see her guest. She wondered if the guy had left because she hadn't been gone very long, at which point the hero said he was still here. The young man stood behind Veronica, which frightened her. The beauty took a breath. She asked if the guest was looking around the store and thought to herself that she hadn't noticed him at all. Ray asked if this store had books about magic, because he hadn't found anything like that, and the girl was surprised that he could read. But you shouldn't judge books by their titles. Veronica thought that this mysterious stranger was even more interesting than she had initially thought. The hero asked how the girl's grandfather was feeling, and the beauty replied that it was unlikely that she would be able to talk to him now, as the old man had fallen asleep again. She asked if the boy could come here tomorrow, and Ray didn't argue. When the hero was about to go outside, Veronica ventured out and asked him why he wanted to meet her grandfather, and it seemed that this was his original goal. The young man stopped. He did not know what to say to his new acquaintance. Ray replied that he was looking for a prism and hoped to find answers to his questions. After leaving the bookstore, the hero decided to go to a restaurant. He was quite hungry. The young man reread Philip's notes. 32, 10 building on an empty shopping street, name unknown, male, age 30 to 40, always leaves at 8 a.m. and 7 p.m., returns with a basket of food and comes down. It was no coincidence that the hero chose this particular restaurant. This is where the stranger regularly comes through, and Ray hoped that today he would learn something more about magic. The young man read that Philip had received this information from a local waiter, Johnny. It was at this moment that Johnny brought a tray of food. The hero said that he did not order it, and the waiter replied that it was on the house because he was a hunter, a real hero for children. Ray said he had a question for him, and Johnny replied that he was ready to share even the password to their pantry. The young man showed the note and asked how accurate this person's schedule was, and the waiter replied that it was almost 100%. Over the past 3 months that he has been working here, he has seen a man leave and enter the basement of this building at the specific hours Philip wrote about. Suddenly, someone called Johnny, who apologized and said he had to go, and if the hunter wanted to ask him anything else, he could call him. After saying goodbye, the young man quickly ran toward the kitchen. The hero looked at his watch. There was still an hour before the mysterious stranger appeared. Ray decided to wait it out and started eating. The young man quickly finished the delicious dessert, leaving an empty plate. Next in line was a cocktail. Sipping a drink through a straw, the guy looked out the window. It was at that moment that he finally saw the man he was hunting. Ray immediately recognized the man, and he froze in place, looking at the mysterious figure. The hero immediately saw his orange mana with the same rings as the one with the monocle. The guy thanked Johnny for the food and ran off. The waiter said it was an honor to serve him. The young man recalled that this man leaves his house for about an hour, and he needed to examine his home and find anything related to magic during this time. Ray boldly went down the stairs and approached the right door. Pulling the handle, the hero realized that it was locked, as he expected. He decided to find a way to get in. The young man activated a large pallet of mala to open the door with magic. The energy reacted, it flows into the lock, it should work. Indeed, the mana worked quickly and the door opened. The next moment, the hero found himself in the house of a real magician. Ray himself could not believe that he had done it. He looked at his own hands and thought about how he had done it. The guy decided to get distracted, and now it's time to focus on something else. The young man's attention was drawn to a bucket with a pile of crumpled papers. Now it is important to find information about this magician. Ray unfolded one of the crumpled sheets, and what he read resembled a letter. It was about a red bloodstone that the magician received, and he could use it to become stronger. The next thing that caught the hero's attention was the phrase, "We need to dig to 66. The hero immediately recalled this number, 66 street orphans, and Kedrick's words that they had agreed to join the organization when they had 66 members. Ray had a terrible hunch that this was the red mercenary Kedrick had told him about, and judging by the content of the letter, he had been kicked out of the organization. Suddenly, an object on his desk caught his attention. It was a box of some kind, from which red mana was spreading to different sides of the room. Ray opened the lid, and what he saw was amazing. It was a red stone, just like the one on Kedrick's ring. I think it's the red bloodstone mentioned in the letter, but unlike mana in the air, this stone attracts it more smoothly. The hero wondered what would happen if he used magic while holding this stone in his hand. Ray was stunned. It was the most pure flame he had ever created, and it took less time to create. Suddenly, footsteps were heard on the stairs. The guy clutched the stone in his hand, wondering if the man had already returned, because no more than 15 minutes had passed. The next moment, the door opened and a mysterious magician entered the room. He said under his breath that he had forgotten his wallet. The years really take their toll, and that's why his boss left him. The magician called himself Walter and told him not to be afraid. As soon as he was done with this, he could return to the organization. The man continued to talk to himself, saying that he needed to buy more food, so he wouldn't have to go out for a while. All this time, while the owner was at home, Ray was hiding behind the door. He was glad that he had left again. On the stairs, the magician remembered that he had forgotten something else. He abruptly opened the door and saw the hero. The magician asked angrily if the young man thought that he would not feel the intruders in the house. Ray wasn't going to talk. He pulled out a knife and immediately attacked. The man took a step back, avoiding the attack. The hero was faster and managed to strike. There was a scar on the magician's face. He thought the organization had sent a killer, but it was just a child. Blood was flowing directly into his eye. He wanted to know how the stranger had gotten into his apartment, but Ray wasn't going to talk. The hero decided that he would twist him and make him tell everything he knew about magic. But this time the man was ready to attack. He intercepted the boy's dagger. The magician exclaimed, "How dare he ignore the elder and pull a knife on him?" The man could not understand why this kid was so strong. He did not have the strength to snatch the dagger from Ray's hands. The hero realized as soon as this person was able to focus mana in one hand. He used magic to avoid cutting his palm. Walter exclaimed that he had given in to the child, and a strange weapon resembling a sickle appeared in his hand. The next moment, he rushed at the hero, promising to cut him to pieces. Ray was stunned, wondering if he could use magic in this way too. The magician was fast and skillful, despite his age. The man could not understand how the boy had learned to use mana. The hero clearly remembered the color combination and mana ratio he used. Walter thought, "What the hell is going on? Metallization is a unique magic that he invented." The sorcerer could not believe that he was fighting with the boy and could not get the upper hand. Ray was faster and more skillful, and he managed to wound the magician again. The man fell to one knee, and the floor around him quickly turned red. The sorcerer's eyes lit up with red fire, and he decided that the boy had been sent here by his former boss. He had heard that among the assassins, there was someone who could copy magic. The hero pierced the man's arm with a dagger, thus pinning him to the wall, and decided to lower his voice to hide his identity. Ray had a question for him, and Walter answered that he didn't think the famous killer would be so young. The young man knew from experience that such people were difficult to dialogue with, and if he could get some information, it would be better to get rid of them here. Walter laughed. He decided to make sure that the boss accurately assessed his abilities. He could just burn the killer to the ground. The sorcerer, chained to the wall, was able to light a huge fire in a matter of seconds. The temperature was so high that the hero's dagger melted. The magician wanted the boy to tell his boss, Walter, that the bloody eye would soon visit him, of course, if the young man made it out of here alive. The fireman said that his boss must be very sorry to have lost such a powerful sorcerer. The hero saw that the magician's mana moves the rings at a high speed, so the red mana quickly spreads through his body through the vessels. The young man realized that it was dangerous, and if he didn't protect himself with mana, things would be bad. Walter continued to burn and scream that the killer had come to destroy him and take the red bloodstone. The magician demanded that the young man try to kill him again. Ray began to lose patience. He activated mana by combining different colors. The next moment, he managed to activate a powerful defense. The sorcerer immediately realized what the boy was doing. If he came to kill him, he'd better be able to use magic of that level. The hero continued to defend himself. He was not trying to attack now. The young man thought he couldn't get any closer, as the enemy was covered in fire, but he realized that Walter's defense wouldn't last long. But the next moment, the sorcerer managed to surprise Ray. The wizard's pillar of fire has become even more powerful, and the hero will not be able to block it. The young man decided that he should first put out the flames. The sorcerer noticed that the guy had removed his shield. Had he gone crazy? Suddenly, the man's eyes went to his forehead, a turn of events he had not expected. He saw Ray activating the water magic and realized why he was doing it. He was impressed by the young man's skill, as he simultaneously uses two main types of mana. The hero's fist was covered with blue mana, and now he will launch a water attack, Walter shouted in shock. If he's using a water element, it means only one thing: he's not a mercenary. The hero was finally ready to extinguish this powerful flame. There was so much water that it covered everything around, and this attack worked. When it was all over, the young man was finally able to leave the apartment. Red soup flowed from Ray's nose, and the hero decided that this was a side effect of using magic to the maximum of his mental powers. The young man thought Walter's firepower was incredible. The mana rings moved very smoothly, and the speed of mixing colors was incredible. This Walter was a very strong sorcerer, and the young man could not imagine how much stronger the magician with the manacles was in this case. And now Ray is not yet able to take revenge on him. But the hero was confident that he could become much stronger over time. If he had only known that it would turn out like this, he would have taken those red stones with him. The next morning, Ray returned to Veronica's bookstore. The young man arrived at the store on time, expecting to learn something new about magic today. The girl was very happy to see her savior. She noticed that the guy had changed his clothes because he had been wearing a raincoat the previous night. The hero replied that he had managed to get rid of it. He thought that even though Walter couldn't see his face because of the darkness, if he saw familiar clothes, he might remember. Veronica said that she told her grandfather about Ray and his help, and that the boy was looking for a rainbow. They went up to the second floor, and suddenly the door of one of the rooms opened. Two children looked out from there, watching the stranger closely. One of the boys was surprised, and the other was rather annoyed by the appearance of a guest in their house. Veronica explained that these are her younger brothers. Her grandfather took them from the orphanage, and he also took her, Molta and Jolfina. Ray asked if they had been taken from the orphanage to be taught magic, and the girl asked him how he knew. The young man replied that he saw no other reason, and that Veronica had told him yesterday that she had learned magic from her grandfather. The red-haired beauty realized that the guy was telling the truth. Finally, she led Ray to the room and explained that his grandfather was there behind the door. They entered, and the girl introduced their savior to the old sorcerer. A gray-haired man with long hair, a mustache, and a beard sat with his eyes closed, his hand resting on a book. The old man asked his granddaughter to wait outside the door. He wanted to talk to the young man alone. Ray sat down on a chair by Veronica's grandfather's bedside. The man said that for the first time he was very grateful to the guy for his help. He had heard that the young man had helped his granddaughter to ward off those guys. It should have been him, but his health was failing. Ray said it was not difficult. The young man looked at the sorcerer's chest to see what mana was in his cup. He saw 4 rings, red for anger, orange for comfort, and yellow for joy. Green is for embarrassment, blue is for indifference, and dark blue is for pity. And it is very difficult to feel all these emotions at the same time. But it's not mania. The colors seem to be painted on the cup. A lot of waves of emotions have left their mark over the years. Ray thought such emotions were difficult to read. Graham brought him out of his reverie by asking if he really wanted to learn more about magic. The young man sincerely replied that he had been looking for a real sorcerer for a long time, and his grandfather said that he was a sorcerer himself, and that according to Veronica, Ray was quite good at magic. The hero said that he did not know many things, he did not have enough information, and the man asked where the guy came from. The young man did not answer, and Graham decided that it was a long story. The old wizard offered to play a game, with the winner of each round asking the loser a question. Ray's quick reaction is proof of his keen senses. The man asked if the young man could feel the energy between them. The hero admitted that he not only feels it, but also sees it. Graham thought the guy's aura had changed, he said. Every magic uses its own element. When the elements meet, they can even create new ones. Now there is a support element between them. This element is needed to maintain homeostasis in magic without the influence of external factors. The old man added that they were the most difficult to maneuver, but what about the element behind it? Veronica's grandfather asked in surprise if the boy could feel too. The hero confirmed that he did indeed see 2 elements, light gray and dark gray, although they were more like shades of gray. This information amused the old man. It was a rather strange reaction. Graham thought he didn't need to visit hundreds of shelters. This guy instantly saw the elements of support and duration. An ordinary magician is not capable of this. The old man thought how cruel fate was. He didn't have long to live. Why, he had only just found his true talent. The young man asked me what the next element that follows the support is called. The man replied that it would be no fun if he told him everything at once, so let Ray win and find out for himself. The rules are simple. Now there is a sphere between them, created from 2 different elements. Graham wanted the hero to try to drag it to him. The game would end when it reached someone's hand. If the young man wants, the old man can place her closer to the boy first to be fair. The hero thought that it would be difficult to defeat such an experienced sorcerer, but he got a leniency, so it's possible. Ray said that sounds good. Time to start. The old man held out his hand and the game began. The young man also put his hand forward and began to draw the magic sphere toward him. The hero thought he would succeed, but he was not strong enough. The sphere quickly fell into the hands of the sorcerer. Now the young man looks really stunned. He did not expect such a quick defeat. The young man thought that this old man, despite his age and health, was very fast. Graham said that since he won this round, he would ask first. He wanted to know who the boy had learned magic from, and Ray answered honestly that he was self-taught. The old man said that Ray had already surprised him for the 2nd time in one day. Ray asked in surprise if self-taught sorcerers were rare, and Graham said he would answer this question if the young man won the game. The hero doesn't want to waste time and rush to start the second round. Not even a minute later, the hero realized that he had lost again. The old man said that he had won this time so he could ask the next question. The results of this game depend on a person's ability to manage mana. The number of rings does not matter. Ray thought that at this rate, he would continue to lose and learn nothing. He decided to use a different method in the next round. They continued the game, and it was the hero's third attempt to defeat the experienced sorcerer. The young man tried his best to draw the magic sphere to him. Stretching one hand forward, Ray activated blue mana on the other. Old Graham couldn't understand why he couldn't draw the sphere to him. This time the hero won. The old sorcerer realized that he used a different technique, Ray said. There is no rule in this game that prohibits interfering with the opponent. Grandpa smiled. Now he was ready to answer any question. The young man wanted to know what mana was. This question amused Veronica's grandfather. He replied that mana is the fundamental element of all the components of this world. A person cannot see or touch it, but can observe its movements through secondary phenomena, such as lightning strikes, flames, or a storm. Very few people are born with the ability to tactily perceive mana, but the ability to sense mana does not mean that a person can use magic, because the talent for sensing mana or managing it are different areas. The hero asked his grandfather if by talent he meant the ability to control mana. The old man thought it was a second question, but he would answer it. It refers to the ability to separate the individual elements that make up energy and combine them in the right proportions. Usually, those who understand themselves have a great talent for magic. In fact, magic is a discipline of studying the inner essence of oneself. That's why magicians say, mana comes to those who are honest with themselves. The young man repeated the old man's last words, and they struck him. Graham said it was time to play their game again. He thought that the support element was the most difficult, and Ray learned how to do it literally in real time, having studied its characteristics on the go. The hero won again and was ready to ask the next question. The young man said that he wanted to know about the rings that encircle the hearts of sorcerers. The old man replied that they could be considered vessels for mana, which automatically begins to accumulate in the rings created. After a single purification, the distribution of elements in this process depends on the magician. Ray asked if the purification process made it easier to use air mana, and the old man replied, "That's right, there's another important reason for this process." The man explained that mana from the air can be used several times, but if you do it all the time, you can get poisoned. This reaction usually occurs immediately after a magician uses mana from the air. They may feel drowsy and foggy, or unable to stop laughing, or unable to stop crying. Some sorcerers may experience irritability and anger, and the symptoms of mana poisoning are different for everyone. When emotions accumulate, they turn into an incurable mental illness. Ray was amazed that mana and emotions interact with each other. Using untreated mana can make a person hysterical. The young man recalled Kedrick's behavior, in which case this information explains why he has not yet been mana poisoned. That's because until recently, the hero had no emotions at all. Ray said, "Someone will be able to use mana out of thin air. Being immune to poisoned mana, it will give them a huge benefit." The old man said that this was a unique idea. The man added that he had not yet met such a sorcerer, and if such a person existed, he would be an invincible magician who used purified mana for safety. There is an incredible amount of mana in the air, an endless source of energy. The old man asked if the boy had a dream. Ray asked if it was something he saw in his dreams, and the man said he was not talking about dreams, but about how the boy saw his future. The young man's eyes were closed, and finally he said that he had a few wishes. He wants to kill some people and save some. It was a very eye-opening experience, considering that Ray was telling this to an almost complete stranger. Graham said he has often heard people say this, but this is the first time he has been told the point in direct text. The man decided to ask directly if Ray wanted to learn magic from him. The hero was stunned to hear such a proposal. The young man did not understand why the sorcerer with the 4 rings wanted to teach an orphan from the street. He did not understand the old man's whole idea. It was hardly charity. He needed something. The man seemed to read the boy's mind. He said he wanted nothing from him. These words of the old man made the hero agree to his proposal. He said that he wanted to study. Graham folded his hands near his chin. He was pleased with the new student's decision. The man decided that it was time to call his granddaughter, who was still waiting at the door. Veronica said that she was not trying to eavesdrop, and her grandfather replied that he knew that and invited her to sit down. He asked her if she remembered why he had taken them from the orphanage, and she replied that he wanted to leave her knowledge as a legacy. Graham said that was correct, and now he would reveal some of his knowledge, so let them listen carefully. Now he will tell the children about the rainbow because he heard that Ray was looking for it. The young man turned into a hearing. The story of the rainbow has been passed down by word of mouth since ancient times, and even now there are many seekers of this miracle. There is only one theory about the rainbow, but they all come down to one thing. The one who finds its edge can become a being like God. Veronica asked her grandfather who God was, and the old man explained that he was a powerful being who could create anything in this world. Ray realized that's why the monocle magician was also looking for a rainbow. He wanted to gain unlimited power. Veronica wanted to ask her grandfather something else, but she didn't have time. The window of this room was broken by another stone from street thugs. The girl stopped in mid-sentence and looked at the broken window in fright. Before the stone could reach the beauty's face, it was intercepted. Ray managed to intercept the threat, thus saving Veronica again. The girl watched the glass shards dancing as if enchanted, as if it were the magic of the wind. Ray looked furious. How dare those bastards come back? He gave them a good warning, leaving one of the bandits' arms incapacitated. But it seems they are not going to give up on this request for a bookstore. The grandfather told Ray that he had saved them again, and he sincerely thanked him. The man said that he would like to do it himself, but unfortunately he could not. He asked the girl to heal the hero's wound. Veronica sent white healing mana to the cut on the boy's arm. The girl put a bandage on top and promised that it would heal soon. The young man thought it was just a small abrasion, nothing more. The hero asked if it was really necessary to shed tears for this, and Veronica replied that if not, the skin would be scarred. The young man thought that scars are useful. They are marks left by enemies of the past, which sounds good. Graham asked Veronica to refrain from using magic until the circle was created. It seems she used a lot of air magic. The young man said, "I think these bastards have been throwing stones for a long time." And the old man replied, "About a month. I think it was someone's order. One person really wanted to buy this store. Most likely it was his handiwork." Seeing the old man's sad face, Ray realized that they were not going to sell the bookstore. The old man replied that he hadn't planned it until now, but the further it went, the harder it was to resist. "My grandfather told me that he opened this store 6 months ago, all in order to train his students and finish the research he invested his life in." That day, the children congratulated him on the opening of the store. They gave the old man a bouquet of flowers, and that day everyone was happy. He was satisfied with his life. He could meet his children and help those who needed books. But because of his illness, Veronica took over the store. If he dies, things will only get worse and children will become easy prey. The girl said nothing. She silently swept the broken glass off the floor. Grun said sadly that he would have to sell the place and find a suitable home for the children. Veronica could not hold back any longer. She shouted that the store should not be sold. This place is the grandfather's dream. He said that since childhood he wanted to have a bookstore. The man thanked the girl for her concern. The man said that in this world, things don't always happen the way you want them to. Veronica said that she did not want to start a store anyway. The beauty could not hold back her tears. She did not want her grandfather to leave them. The old man was confused and tears came to his eyes. He hugged his granddaughter, saying that he seemed to have put too much on her. Ray was silent, thinking about how he could help them. A little later, when Graham fell asleep, Veronica told her new friend that her grandfather suffered from a rare disease called perpetual sleep disorder. The illness began 2 months ago, and the old man's sleep is getting longer and longer until he closes his eyes forever. Grandpa can no longer move and sleeps only 2 or 3 hours a day. Veronica asked if Ray would come to see them the next day, as Graham usually wakes up in the morning. As a farewell, the girl gave the hero her cloak. Ruta said they would see each other tomorrow. As Ray was leaving the bookstore, he remembered his friend's crying face. Although the young man does not understand someone else's sadness, he knows a few words and actions of support. The hero looked around and told Veronica that she should not worry. Everything will be fine. The girl did not expect these words from an unemotional young man. Tears came to her face again. The hero turned to the door again. The beauty thanked him for his support and wiped her tears with her hand. Once outside, Ray tried to figure out where the bandits had gone. 8th Street, where the bookstore is located, is the territory of Jeffers' group. The hero decided that those guys were almost certainly from there. Did they all hide because of the black rain? The hero planned to deal with Jeffer, but it seems he will have to change his plans. The young man decided to find Philip first. If he was connected to other groups, he could probably arrange a meeting with this Jeffer. Suddenly, the hero saw something ahead that caught his interest. He hid, watching what was happening there, and 4 men in raincoats stood by the door. Ray recognized the guys from Kedrick's band and wondered what they were doing here. Having overheard the conversations of these 4, the hero was upset. It turns out that Kedrick is now in the middle of the container, and the young man imagined a terrible picture. He was afraid that Philip was left alone with an unrestrained boss. Crazy Kedrick had already beaten up the bespectacled man, shouting that he was a selfish bastard. He could not contain his anger. Now Ray understood what mana poisoning looked like. Suddenly, Kedrick heard the sounds of a fight outside the door. The next moment, the hero kicked the door and appeared in the room. All four of the boss's associates were lying on the ground near the entrance to the container. Ray silently looked directly into the eyes of the local leader. Kedrick, splattered with Philip's blood, asked what was wrong, if the hunter had questions for him. The head of the hotel was sitting on the floor against the wall. He was beaten up pretty badly. Philip's eyes were closed, and he had abrasions and traces of blood on his face.
Pet the cat.